The morning sun rose like a blazing orange ball over London, promising one of the hottest days the city had seen in years. By 10 o'clock, the temperature had already climbed to 28 degrees, and weather forecasters warned it would reach 35 by afternoon. The streets shimmered with heat waves, making the distant buildings appear to dance in the scorching air. Thousands of people had gathered along the royal route since early morning, hoping to catch a glimpse of the beloved royal family. Families spread blankets under whatever shade they could find, while vendors sold ice cream and cold drinks to the sweating crowd. Children splashed in the fountains nearby, their parents fanning themselves with programs and newspapers. The atmosphere was festive despite the oppressive heat. Union Jack flags hung limply in the still air, and people wore their finest clothes for this special royal appearance. Elderly ladies sat on folding chairs, their handbags containing bottles of water and small fans. Teenagers took selfies while trying to stay cool under makeshift umbrellas, but while the crowd could move freely, seeking relief wherever possible, the royal guards had no such luxury. These dedicated soldiers stood at their assigned posts along the ceremonial route, wearing their traditional heavy red tunics and tall bearskin hats. Their duty required them to remain perfectly motionless, regardless of weather conditions, maintaining the dignity and tradition that had been upheld for centuries. Sergeant James Morrison had been standing at his post outside Westminster Abbey for nearly 3 hours. The 26-year-old soldier from Yorkshire had served in the Royal Guard for 5 years, but nothing had prepared him for this brutal heat. His thick woolen uniform, designed for London's typically cool climate, had become a prison of fabric that trapped every bit of warmth against his body. Sweat poured down his face from beneath the heavy bearskin hat, which weighed several pounds and felt like a furnace on his head. His vision began to blur slightly, and his mouth felt like sandpaper. The rifle in his hands seemed to grow heavier with each passing minute, but his training demanded absolute stillness and silence. James could hear the crowd chattering excitedly nearby, the sound of ice cream vendors calling their wares, and children laughing as they played in the shade. Every fiber of his being longed for just one sip of cool water. But duty came first. His fellow guards stood equally motionless at their posts, each fighting their own private battle against the relentless sun. The young soldier's legs began to feel unsteady, and small black spots occasionally danced at the edges of his vision. He focused on his breathing, trying to stay conscious and maintain his position. Several times concerned onlookers had noticed his distress, but protocol prevented anyone from approaching an on-duty royal guard. James knew that fainting would bring shame not only to himself but to his entire unit. The crowd's excitement reached fever pitch as the royal motorcade appeared in the distance. Black Bentleys with small flags fluttering on their hoods moved slowly down the street, escorted by police motorcycles. Camera phones rose into the air like a forest of small screens, everyone hoping to capture the perfect shot of their favorite royals. Prince William emerged first from the lead car, his navy suit impeccable despite the heat. He smiled and waved to the cheering crowd, though perspiration was visible on his forehead. Princess Catherine followed, looking radiant in a light blue dress that seemed to shimmer in the bright sunlight. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo to help combat the oppressive temperature. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Prince George stepped out, now 12 years old and growing into his future role with quiet confidence. Princess Charlotte, 10 years old with bright, intelligent eyes, appeared next wearing a sweet yellow dress with white flowers. Little Prince Louis, just 7, bounded out of the car with the energy only a young child could maintain in such heat. The family began their slow walk toward the abbey, stopping frequently to acknowledge the crowd's enthusiasm. But Princess Charlotte, known for her sharp observation skills and caring nature, seemed distracted by something the adults had missed. Her eyes kept darting toward the line of royal guards, and her expression grew increasingly concerned as she noticed one soldier swaying almost imperceptibly at his post. Princess Charlotte suddenly stopped walking and gently tugged on her mother's arm. Catherine, who was busy acknowledging the enthusiastic crowd, bent down to hear what her daughter urgently needed to tell her. Charlotte pointed discreetly toward Sergeant Morrison, whose face had turned an alarming shade of red beneath his bearskin hat. "Mummy, that soldier looks very sick from the heat," Charlotte whispered with genuine worry in her voice. "Look how he's shaking. Someone needs to help him before he falls down." Catherine followed her daughter's gaze and immediately understood the gravity of the situation. The guard was clearly in distress, fighting to maintain his position despite obvious heat exhaustion. Small drops of sweat were falling from beneath his hat onto the pavement, creating a tiny puddle at his feet, while Catherine began to signal discreetly to their security detail. Princess Charlotte had already made up her mind about what needed to be done. She reached into her small white handbag and pulled out a bottle of water that had been given to her by their staff earlier. Without waiting for permission or considering royal protocol, she broke away from the formal procession. The crowd fell into stunned silence as they watched the young princess walk directly toward the suffering guard. Her small figure seemed even tinier next to the imposing soldier, but her determination was unmistakable. Photographers lowered their cameras, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary that transcended typical royal photo opportunities. Standing directly in front of Sergeant Morrison, Princess Charlotte looked up at his sweat-covered face with pure compassion in her young eyes. She could see him struggling to maintain his composure, despite his obvious physical distress. Without speaking, she held up the water bottle. Making her intentions perfectly clear, the soldier found himself in an impossible situation. His training demanded absolute stillness during royal ceremonies, but here was a member of the royal family herself, offering him help. His human need for water battled with his military discipline. While hundreds of people watched this unprecedented moment unfold, Princess Charlotte, seeing his hesitation, reached up and gently touched his gloved hand. "Please," she said softly, her voice filled with genuine concern. "You've been so brave standing here in this terrible heat. You need to drink something before you get really sick." Her words, spoken with such sincere kindness, broke through all the formal barriers and military protocol. Sergeant Morrison looked down at this remarkable child who had noticed his suffering when so many others had simply walked past. In her eyes, he saw not just royal duty, but pure human compassion that knew no boundaries. Slowly, carefully, the guard accepted the water bottle from Princess Charlotte's small hands. His own hands trembled slightly from heat exhaustion as he brought the bottle to his parched lips. The cool water was like a miracle, immediately beginning to restore his strength and clear his blurred vision. As Sergeant Morrison finished drinking, he carefully handed the empty bottle back to Princess Charlotte. For just a brief moment, he broke from his rigid military posture to give her a small nod of profound gratitude. That tiny gesture conveyed more thanks than 1,000 words could have expressed. The crowd, which had watched this entire exchange in complete silence, suddenly erupted into thunderous applause. But these weren't the polite, formal claps usually heard at royal events. These were genuine, emotional cheers from people who had witnessed something truly beautiful and deeply moving. Tears streamed down many faces in the crowd. Parents pointed out the scene to their children as a perfect example of kindness and caring for others. Elderly spectators nodded with approval, remembering exactly why they had always loved this royal family. Not for their wealth or status, but for their genuine humanity. Princess Charlotte walked back to rejoin her family, completely unaware of the profound impact her simple act had made on thousands of hearts. To her, she had simply seen someone who needed help and had done what felt naturally right. The fact that her gesture had moved an entire crowd to tears was secondary to the basic human decency she had shown. Within hours, the story spread around the world through social media and news outlets. The hashtag Princess Charlotte Kindness began trending globally, with people sharing their own stories of small acts of kindness inspired by this 10-year-old princess who had reminded everyone that compassion knows no boundaries of age, status, or protocol.